With the first pick in our 1 QB rookie mock draft, we know what it is. We know who it needs to be. It is Bijan Robinson. I mean, there's really not much we can say about him that you guys have not heard. And it's crazy because it's January when we're recording this. Like everything that can be said about Bijan, he is a generational talent. He is an elite receiving back, a incredible between the tackles rusher. There is nothing he cannot do exceptionally well. And you've heard all of this, and we've been hearing about it for 2 years now. He's the 101. It doesn't matter if it's Superflex, 1 QB.
I would say that, to add a little bit of context, I think a lot of people who ultimately got the 1.01 because their team was that bad in Superflex leagues should not be drafting Bijan Robinson. I think more that you need to draft him if you have the 101, but you should be looking to move that pick away. Whereas in one quarterback leagues, which is where we're at right now, I think even if you got there at the 1.01 because your team is that bad, you should be taking Bijan Robinson anyway. I would not be looking to trade this pick away unless you're getting Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. You know, you could debate, depending on how truly bad your team is, if you want a CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown, a Jalen Waddle, you know, trade that pick straight up, maybe get a little something with the receiver coming back too from those types of players in that tier. But I'd say 99% of the time in one quarterback leagues, even if your team is truly the 101, you should just be taking Bijan Robinson and just be extremely happy about that, because he will speed up your rebuild. Whereas in Superflex, you know, if you don't have the quarterbacks, you're going to be inhibited a little bit still, and Bijan might not necessarily be helping you. So I think that little extra bit of context there and the difference between 1 QB and Superflex is a big point to make for taking Bijan.
Exactly. So I did just trade away the 101 in a Superflex league, and it's a monster deal. But I'll kind of break it down. Like, this is the type of return I am looking for if I am moving high valued assets that involve the 101. So we gave up 101, 103, Justin Fields, Treylon Burks. So a monster package leaving my team. But in return, we're getting Josh Allen, the premier pick as far as I'm concerned, the premier player as far as I'm concerned. We get Drake London, we get Travis Etienne, then we get Josh Jacobs. So that is where Bijan still could have fit my roster. My roster would still have been semi-competitive. But if I am giving him up, I am looking for a haul that makes me, you know, over the top contender. There's no other way you should be trading him or looking to move him. You know, that has to be the return.
So let me slide over to the 1.02 then. And this pick here is the RB2, Jahmyr Gibbs, bypassing all of the other wide receivers. I'm going to go with the guy who I think is the clear-cut RB2 in this class. I've seen a lot of people already, and I know it's going to annoy the crap out of me for the next like 3, 4, 5 months, talking about Jahmyr Gibbs' size and all that whatnot. He can't run between the tackles and blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff is just nonsense. If you watch Jahmyr Gibbs, yes, he's not a prototypical grinder, right? He's not Josh Jacobs. He's not Saquon Barkley. He's not Ezekiel Elliott, but he is Alvin Kamara. He's Travis Etienne. You know, he could be a little bit of Christian McCaffrey as well, where they can definitely do well in between the tackles. But the primary piece that we're looking at is receiving ability and the explosiveness.
Yeah. And the other comp I've seen that I love is, imagine if DeAndre Swift was healthy all the time. Like, that's what he can be. That's what he could be. I think that's what he will be. And Swift, for all of his injury issues aside, when he's on the field, he's basically been a top 5 running back. That is the type of production, the type of usage he earns and puts onto the field. The NFL will tell you if you need to care about the size. That is what happens. We get into this idea where we double count these types of things, where NFL teams just literally watched him, every bit of tape out there on him, and said, no, doesn't matter. If they make that decision, you need to make that decision as well. And I think that's the best way to go about it. With the 103, I am going to go with my wide receiver 1. I believe he's now your wide receiver 1 as well. Yeah. It is JSN, Jaxon Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. And I get, he didn't really have a junior year. It didn't happen because just pure injury. So put that aside. If he came out last year as a sophomore, he may very well have been my wide receiver 1 anyways. Because at the time, he was competing with Olave and Garrett Wilson, who both went on, right, to dominate the NFL in their rookie seasons, and JSN was outproducing them. He looked like the alpha wide receiver in that offense, right? It's basically Chase and Justin Jefferson tenfold because you're looking at 3 wide receivers instead of 2. That's the type of domination. He's an elite route runner. He is quick off the line. And while he doesn't have that long speed, he makes up for it. Like, he is the closest thing we've probably seen to Cooper Kupp since he came out and kind of lit the NFL on fire, his second season. That is the type of ceiling he has. Does he get there? That remains to be seen, obviously. Don't let anybody tell you his ceiling is not as high as someone like Quentin Johnston or Jordan Addison, because the type of play style he carries has been proven to just succeed over and over in the NFL. His ceiling is sky high.
I saw one that was better recently on Twitter. Maybe not better, but maybe describes more of a median outcome for him and not reaching, the Cooper Kupp that we've seen for the past 2 years. Amon-Ra St. Brown, which I think is fantastic, because you remember Amon-Ra, I believe he was also a 4.6 guy, and he doesn't have the long speed. But what he does have is he's more of a bigger kind of slot guy, really, really good route runner, just wins at all facets and levels of the field. And as long as he is going to be the focal point of an offense, which if you're taking Jaxon Smith-Njigba possibly in the top 10 picks, he is going to be the focal point of whatever offense he goes into. So with the 1.04, I'll just roll that right into my pick here. And I will take my wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 2 as well, Jordan Addison, who has a fantastic name. I will never not say that every time I talk about him. But yeah, Jordan Addison is, I just think, the clear-cut wide receiver 2, as much as JSN is the clear-cut 1. I think Addison is directly right behind him, and that's how it should be for the remainder of draft season, and probably will be after the NFL draft as well. Yes, he's a little bit undersized, but if you just watch him, look at his stat lines, what he did with Kenny Pickett, what he did with Caleb Williams, dominator rating, breakout age. He has all the analytical measures, all of the film tape measures as well. He's absolutely fantastic. Jordan Addison is my wide receiver 2 in 1.04 in 1 quarterback leagues.
Yeah, Jordan Addison, still my wide receiver 2. The only thing you want to do to poke a hole and play devil's advocate is the junior year production is weird. It just feels weird for a guy that was so utterly dominant as a sophomore, that seeing him get a massive QB upgrade with Caleb Williams and then put up, drastically different numbers is just surprising to me. I'm not really knocking him for it. He's still my wide receiver 2, but that is, if you want to find an argument against him, I think it's a valid one. Jumping to our 105 here. If you watched our video last week, you know exactly who this is about to be. It is my RB3. It is Addison's RB3. It is Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker is one of the bigger boom bust prospects, I think, in this class. I don't think that's a hot take, because the upside is spectacular. He's an elite receiver, a track star throughout high school and college, and carries a home run speed, a home run threat every time he touches the ball. The man is just a playmaker. All of those things make it very, very difficult to pass on him at 105, 106. If you want to take a wide receiver over him here, I get it. But the way Sean Tucker plays, it's tantalizing. That's the word. He kind of mesmerizes you. The dude has, again, a great release package out of the backfield, as in he can make the first guy miss. And then again, has that home run speed, the home run threat to just house every single ball. And then has the PPR upside. I don't really know what else you want out of a guy.
I said in the video last week when I was talking about Sean Tucker that I just think that he checks every single box that you're looking for out of a running back. When you're looking at running backs, do you want somebody in college who had almost 1,500 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns on 250 carries in a single season? Is that something you would like out of a running back? Yes.
Yes.
Do you want a running back that catches 36 passes in a single season?
Yes, I think I would.
Do you want a running back who, has 4.35 speed out of the backfield?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
And then, just to top it off, he's not the biggest guy, but he's not small either. He's 5'10", 205. That's almost like perfect running back size for an NFL running back in today's game. Does all of that just sound like a running back that you want?
I think it does. Yeah, I think I'm in.
Yeah. I think I am too. That's essentially where I'm at with Sean Tucker. When you compare him with anybody else, between him and some people's, other RB3s, Zach Evans. Well, Zach Evans never produced like Sean Tucker did. Sean Tucker's also a massively better athlete. You can say the same thing with Kendre Miller. You can probably say the same thing with Zach Charbonnet in terms of athleticism. The production is, in terms of best collegiate season, really, really close as well too. And Charbonnet, I think, is just a different style of running back. So I get that one. Devon A-Chain, you love the speed with A-Chain. I love the speed with Sean Tucker. And Tucker's not, smaller than me. So that at least is a plus as well too. Everything, like I said, that you just want out of a running back. Sean Tucker gives you basically the complete package. The final step will just be making sure that he gets the draft capital needed to be taken at the 1.05. If he's not a round 2 pick, then I'm not taking him at the 105. So moving over to the 1.06, then I am going to go back to the wide receiver position. If you watch my videos, you probably might think that this could be somebody else, but I've been kind of re-looking at some of the analytics, some of the metrics, seeing what's going on at the wide receiver class here. And I'm a little bit more confident in Quentin Johnston than what I was just a couple weeks ago. I was just kind of going over some things, saw some mistakes, some holes in what I was looking at. And Quentin Johnston profile is a lot better than what I initially had him pegged as, which is still not to say that he is not, he is still an imperfect prospect by a lot of different areas. He's not a good route runner, which could be in the sense that maybe TCU didn't develop that part of his game. It could be that they knew that he wasn't a good route runner, so they just gave him what he was good at. The production, even though it looks better, still doesn't look great, or at least great for a wide receiver that I keep hearing that Quentin Johnston is, which is interesting because it seems like he should be a guy that just had so much more production than what he actually did have. Like, I expected a CeeDee Lamb kind of player coming out of Oklahoma, a Jerry Jeudy, that kind of player. And he still isn't quite that, but I am confident in him in terms of that he should be a first round pick with the production that he had at TCU, as long as he goes somewhere that is able to kind of work with him a little bit and he can be the wide receiver 1 almost off the rip. That should be good enough opportunity. I'm willing to take him there at the 106 with the hope and the upside that he does turn into like this DK Metcalf kind of player.
Right. I mean, and when you talk about size, you're not going to find a wide receiver built like him in this draft class that has, the appropriate analytical profile to make sense taking them this high. That is what Quentin Johnston is. 6'4", 215. That's a hulk of a human being. And DK Metcalf is what everybody's going to comp him to. And I think it's fair because DK had massive knocks on his route running coming out. That's why he fell to the second round. Quentin Johnston will be a first round pick. I am pretty confident in that. And I think it's because teams look around this draft class and you don't see a lot of guys with like traditional outside skill sets with the appropriate size. So I think that may push him up boards a little bit as well in this draft. And we've also watched DK Metcalf develop. So that probably gives teams, okay, there's the blueprint, right? For a guy that we can turn from what is not a good route runner into a potentially very good one. If you guys have not heard, we have recently dropped our YouTube membership here on DLF. That means you get more of me, more of Addison. That means extra videos, extra live streams, access to member-only threads, exclusive content. Check that out, guys. Click that join button down below. Jumping to the 107. This is probably who most of you expected Addison to say when we mentioned a wide receiver. It is Josh Downs. We've talked about Josh Downs before, and we're going to say the same thing we've said every time. He is basically perfect analytically. Like, he checks the majority of boxes that you're looking for, right? A college dominator over 30%, a college target share over 30%, a breakout age just over 19 years old. And on top of it all, right, he's an early declare. He checks the 4 boxes that I genuinely care about when I'm looking, at an analytical profile. He's got back-to-back seasons of 1,000+ yards. The guy he produced in college and he checks every box, when you're just kind of look down the list. Now, is he a big guy? No, right? He is going to come in. He's measuring in at like 5'10", 180, which means, 5'9", 175 probably. That's probably where he lands. I'm not overly concerned about his size though.
Yeah, I would love to see him put on a little bit more weight. That would put him up in other comparisons that you can make, like kind of a Jalen Waddle comparison, a Antonio Brown comparison, where he's currently at, or at least he's listed at 5'10", 175. that puts him in the Tyler Lockett area and range of outcomes, which I definitely think he could be and become. And Tyler Lockett has been a fantastic fantasy wide receiver for the past like 3 or 4 years now. And it's kind of where I wanted and still want Jahan Dotson to kind of track and do the exact same thing. Elijah Moore was one that I'm like you. I believe in the talent, the situation.
He's good at football, and I know it.
He is definitely good at football. It's very aggravating, but there's definitely a world in the way that the NFL is moving for players like Josh Downs. Like, you don't just do the production that he did at North Carolina if you're not good at football, despite your size and everything. And if you watch him, this dude makes catches that a guy that small should not be able to make. Like, he's going up, he's high pointing the ball, he's contorting his body in all different like George Pickens kind of ways. And George Pickens is a big guy. Josh Downs should not be doing that kind of stuff, but he's that good. And I really want to put him ahead of Quentin Johnston, but I'm with you. I can't, just because the upside for Johnston is so much higher. And I think that this is a higher ranking of him than where a lot of people normally would have him right now. I've seen him in the early second rounds of a lot of Superflex and one quarter, like late first, one quarterback mock draft too. And at those prices, man, I will have so much Josh Downs, because I'm with you. I have him here too at this 1.07 range, and he is going to be so good. So let's move over to 1.08 then. I'm going to go back to the running back position, and I'm going to talk about another player I think that is probably overdrafted to where a lot of people have, but I just kind of want to put on the map. This is probably the first pick that a lot of people really, shake their head at and wonder what the heck's going on. I'm taking TCU's running back Kendre Miller here at the 1.08. And there's a few reasons for that. One, I think Kendre Miller deserves to be here at this RB4 spot, just overall as a ranking. I think that he is that good. I think he's going to get the draft capital for it. If it's not late day 2 or late second round, I think it's going to be early third round. I think he's in that range. I think the NFL is really going to love what Kendre Miller can bring to the table, both from a statistical standpoint. He had the production this past season in 2022 when Zach Evans transferred to Ole Miss. He has the size. He has actually kind of surprising speed and burst for a player of his size, which is really nice to see. He's got some vision, some contact balance, all that tape kind of lingo. He is and has all of that. And I wanted to give a shout out to David Wilsey. So if you haven't followed David and the work that he does, he is a college and prospect running back guru. This guy has data and models and algorithms just out the wazoo. It is crazy. He is so smart, and his stuff has become so accurate. Like, I trust him so much when it comes to running back prospects. And at least from his initial rankings and testing, without any athletic numbers, so athleticism and combine could change some things. But as of right now, he is predicting that Kendre Miller will be the third or fourth running back taken off the board. And he is also team Kendre Miller way above at least the initial consensus rankings of where they have him.
The only thing I worry about personally is, right, the receiving upside. Can he do it? Is it there? That he's solid. I don't know if he's, NFL capable. That is something I need to see more of. And I need to see the NFL buy in at draft capital, right? Like, those are the two biggest concerns I have. That is the reason he's not my RB4. And it terrifies me because everything you said about David is also true. And David being higher on somebody than me always gives me a little bit of pause because he knows exactly what he's talking about. But again, Kendre Miller has the prototypical size that you love to see in a running back. And again, I think he's more athletic than Charbonnet, but he's a worse wide receiver. I have Charbonnet over him. I have another running back over him as well, but they're all in that same tier. And that is where draft capital, I talk about like shifting players around based on the NFL draft. Draft capital will dictate how that tier ends up falling for me. Kendre Miller belongs in, if you want to call it tier 3, right? Sean Tucker down to maybe RB6 or 7. I think that is where he belongs, and the NFL is going to dictate if that's actually true or not. Moving to 109. This guy wasn't even on the board last time we did a mock draft. And if you guys missed it and you're looking for a Superflex mock, right up here is the Superflex mock draft. Kayshon Boutte out of LSU. So obviously, if you have not tracked his story, he looked like he was set for a monster season in 2021. A breakout wide receiver was a lot of people's wide receiver one in this class heading into 2022. And then basically disaster struck between injuries and, some call it personality issues and just full on disagreement with LSU and how he was being utilized. And he really just turned in a truly terrible junior year. That has not stopped a lot of people from putting him at their wide receiver 4 because the analytical profile that he brings is borderline tops. It is fantastic. A breakout age of 18.3, which if you're keeping track at home, that's a 98th percentile. The man dominated as a freshman or had a very good freshman season. College dominator rating of 31%. Again, puts him in the top 56 percentile of players as well. He just has the tools. He has the prototypical size at 6 feet, 185, that Ja'Marr Chase type size. There's a lot to like. But you cannot ignore just how truly terrible his junior year was. He almost outproduced his junior year as a sophomore on 5 fewer games. He had 30 fewer yards as a sophomore in 5 fewer games. So this is the pause that you now have to have with him. Again, if you just draft him based off of 2021, he might very well have been my wide receiver 1 in this class, but there is enough to be concerned, although the raw talent is absolutely there.
In some ways, it kind of reminds me of George Pickens from last year. If you remember, the Pickens also had a fantastic freshman year as well. And then I think he also had a great sophomore year, but then injury happened, ACL, and then he came back for the last 3 games of the year for some reason, and just didn't produce. But that's fine because he was coming back from an ACL injury, and then there's also kind of personality issues with him, or we've also seen the picture of him staring at his TV when he gets drafted. That's just the kind of person that George Pickens is. I'm wondering if the NFL sees all of this and he does just kind of drop because of that, because of a Joe Mixon kind of thing, like what happened with George Pickens. I could see that happening, and I could see him being a steal. And I just don't know if that still equates to him being a back-end first-round pick. Because I see the upside. The upside was there with George Pickens, too. He had one of the highest ceilings in the class last year.
There's not another wide receiver in this class, I think, that even kind of comes close to him at this point in the draft, right? At wide receiver 5. Because next you're looking at Jalen Hyatt, who we are both not necessarily in on, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice. There's not another guy behind him that if I want to go wide receiver, right? You put him he's in a tier of his own. I think him and Downs are kind of in a tier together. And then behind that you have Mayer and Charbonnet, Evans, Tank Bigsby, the other running backs kind of all fit. This part of the draft, it's upside. If this feels like all upside picks that could just flame out in 2 seasons. So I don't really know who you put over him, at least from a wide receiver standpoint here, unless you are taking Jalen Hyatt higher.
No, I mean, I definitely do agree with all of that. And I would not have any other wide receiver ahead of him for sure. This is kind of how I felt about Quentin Johnston a couple weeks ago, where I was like, he just kind of gets put here because he has to, because there's nobody better. But does that necessarily mean that it's still a good pick? You know what I mean? Would it be better just to trade out? That's you don't have to make the pick. If you don't like Kayshon Boutte here and you're just I just don't see the true upside and the value of taking a guy with his profile and potentially with his draft capital in the back end of the first, then you don't have to make that pick. I just don't know if it ends up being that Boutte, while he might just have to be there just out of necessity for this class in 1 quarterback leagues, just don't know if that's the best use of that pick. Let's move over to the 110, because maybe after the draft, this ends up being a better pick than Kayshon Boutte. And I'm going to take here Zach Charbonnet, a player that, if you watched our rookie live stream, apparently a lot of other people really, really like Zach Charbonnet, and especially more than what you and I did. I think he went at the 1.06 in one of the mock drafts and was around this kind of range. Zach Charbonnet is, I think, a solid athlete, a really, really good runner. He's got the prototypical size. He's got vision. He's got really good contact balance and everything. Very, very good runner. He has good hands, really good receiver as well. he's kind of the complete package, like what Sean Tucker is, just I think at like a lower end kind of level. And I don't exactly know where that fits into the NFL, because that could mean that he's a guy who plays out his entire rookie contract and is like a David Montgomery. But then after that, then what? So I don't know what to do with Charbonnet. I think he's going to be the one guy that the NFL draft is really going to determine where I slot him in.
We just continually lacks what I think would be an elite trait. I think he's just good at a lot of stuff, which is why you calling him, David Montgomery makes so much sense, because you watch David Montgomery and you don't, at no point in time do you think he's not good. You just think, yeah, like that's solid. Like as a Bears fan, I'm aware. Like he doesn't do anything where I'm like, yes, David Montgomery. Like that's just how I feel watching Zach Charbonnet. Him at the 110 makes sense. It just makes sense with this draft class. Situation is going to be very important, because I don't know if he's dominant enough to just throw aside another running back. And I hate saying situation is important, because we always say talent over situation. But when the talent is just a notch below great, you need some situational help. So I think that is going to be key for Charbonnet, like you said. Moving to our 111 here. This is the other running back I'm sure people have been expecting to see at one point or another. It is Zach Evans. And Zach Evans is an interesting prospect for the sole reason of he hasn't really produced at a high level. Like you watch him and you think he looks like a very, very good running back. And then season after season, he's not getting what we'll call an elite workload, right? This was his first season as a junior, just over 150 touches. You're looking at 156, right? Only adding 12 receptions. So the receiving ability is in question as well. And while he is a good runner, like I think he's a very, very good runner, what has happened the last 3 years that he hasn't been able to take on a full job, like that he hasn't been able to earn the type of volume Zach Charbonnet has earned. Like that, those are the types of things that you have to think about and sit there and say, well, what's going on, right? And Dameon Pierce had the same argument. It very well could just be coaching. But Zach Evans left, and then Kendre Miller got a full workload. So these are the types of things you look at, and it's confusing. I think he's very, very talented, but the workload concerns in college are the reason he's slotting this far down for me right now.
Again, shout out to David. In his work, he notes that one of the biggest things that track going from college to the NFL is workload. Yeah. And you often hear a lot, and he tries to dispel this theory so many times of he's got tread on the tire still, right? Or some other guys who got overutilized, they don't have a lot of tread left. They were overutilized, blah, blah, blah. But David says that the number one thing that he continues to find is that in order to succeed at the NFL level, almost every single good running back at the NFL got volume in college. Not every back who got volume in college succeeded in the NFL, but most every NFL running back who succeeded had volume in college. So that's kind of the way that it kind of goes. And you're right. I mean, it is really, really interesting. He didn't have 100 carries up until this past year. Didn't have 150 touches until this past year. I said this in the video last week, and it might break your heart, but he reminds me of Trey Sermon. When Trey Sermon was coming out, everybody was telling me, don't look at the numbers. You got to watch his tape. Look what he did in the final 5 games of the year for Ohio State after he transferred because, he couldn't beat out Ramondre Stevenson at Oklahoma. So he had to transfer. That's a good thing. All right, so let's close out this first round at the 112. I'm going to go to a single position, but I'm not going to go to the quarterback position. I think that there's still one player left that I'm interested in just to see what happens in one quarterback leagues. And that's Michael Mayer. I'm really tantalized, I think is too big of a word for how I feel about Michael Mayer, but I am very, very intrigued, and usually from the fantasy and dynasty community, we're not very good at taking these tight ends in the first round of fantasy rookie drafts. We swung and missed on OJ Howard. We, I guess, kind of swung and missed on Evan Ingram. It was there, then it wasn't there, and then it was back 5 years later. His hit is going to be more meaningful, more impactful than a Jalen Hyatt hit, than a Bryce Young hit, than a Tank Bigsby hit. Those guys hitting could just mean that they're just nice startable assets for you in your start 9, 10, 11 starting lineups. Whereas if Michael Mayer hits, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, upside of, being a top 3 like a Mark Andrews, that is much more of a hit for Michael Mayer, and that's way more beneficial for your team.
It's difficult to find tight ends that produce, 1,600 plus yards, 16 touchdowns, over their last 2 seasons in college. Analytically, right, the dominator rating over 35%, which for tight ends is absurd. Like that's 95th percentile. So he has those pieces, right? He even has the breakout age, which is, 20 years old for a tight end is great, right? That's just outside the 80th percentile. So he does check a ton of boxes. And the people will point and say, well, he can block, so that's bad. TJ Hawkinson could block too. And TJ Hawkinson is finally, right, took a while, is turning into a pretty damn good fantasy tight end. Like
George
that
Kittle's
is
the best blocking tight end in the league.
Right, the most enjoyable person you could possibly watch play football. Like Michael Mayer has the talent, the athleticism, the hands to do damage in the NFL. And I think he gets the draft capital to make it worth it. So I'm in on Mayer. Like I like him a lot again. And at this point in the draft, you got him, Tank Bigsby. Maybe if you're in on Jalen Hyatt, sure, right? The quarterbacks. There's a lot of questionable pieces, and he feels less questionable than I think everybody else left.